All right, we are live and welcome to the Work the System podcast where we help entrepreneurs make more and work less using systems. And I'm your host, Josh Fonger. And today we are recording again live on Facebook. So make sure to leave us your comments, questions, thumbs up, thumbs down. Let us know how we're doing. And you can put your questions in if you're here live for Wayne, Wayne of Ugly Mug Marketing. And let me give you a little intro on Wayne, who's my guest today. With no experience, no contacts, and no outside funding, Wayne Mullins bootstrapped his first business into a massive success at the age of 24 and then sold it. Today, Wayne is the founder of a one-of-a-kind marketing firm, Ugly Mug Marketing. Their clients include Fortune 100 companies, 4 best-selling authors, 2 New York Times best-selling authors, and businesses from over 81 different industries. They have built over 500 custom websites and have worked with clients from around the world. Wayne is also the author of 2 books, So You Have a Website, Now What? And The Freelancer's Guide to Proposals and Pricing. All right, Wayne, so I'm excited to do this interview. This should be fun. So first, before we get started, tell us a little bit about your story, how you got into this line of work, building websites.
You bet. Thanks so much for having me, Josh. I appreciate the opportunity. And as we'll move forward in the conversation, you will get to hear, and those watching on Facebook and watching the podcast will get to kind of hear how Work the System and the system's methodology has really been fundamental in the building of Ugly Mug Marketing. So the story begins actually with the very first company that I started. I graduated with a degree in marketing and decided that I wanted to go in sales. I succeeded in sales after a couple of years. The first year or so was a struggle, but then started succeeding. And what I realized was I was making all of this money for my employer. And I was like, man, I see how much I'm closing in deals. I really want to keep a larger percentage of that. So I'm going to jump out on my own and start a business. And that's what I did. I started a lawn and landscape company, much to my family's dismay, my parents' dismay. After a college degree, I decided to go into lawn and landscape. But over the course of a few years, I grew that company into, at the time, it was the largest in our region. And the result of that was the marketing that we had in place during that time. So during the course of growing that business, I constantly had friends, I had clients of the lawn company coming to me and saying, how are you marketing your business to grow it at this level? So after 3 years in that industry, I put the business up for sale, sold it. And that business, the person who bought that is still up and running with that same business that I sold them now, 10 plus years ago. So that parlayed into all of the people asking about marketing into Ugly Mug Marketing. My passion back then was direct response marketing. I'd become a student over the years of Dan Kennedy and his style of direct response marketing that led into Jay Abraham and led into all of these great authors, great marketing minds. And so my intention initially was to solely do direct response marketing. And what I discovered was the market, at least in our region, our area, wanted nothing to do with direct response. It was foreign to them. What's common, what's popular at the time around here was kind of traditional brand building marketing. So it was a struggle initially. And as I would go out and visit with people, meet with people, a common question that kept coming back was, can you help with the website? Can you fix my website? Can you build a website? And so the answer was always no. And then finally I was like, man, all of these people keep asking. So I said, the next person who asked that question, my answer is going to be yes. I had no clue anything about web. Next person asked literally within a couple of weeks of that and said yes. And then from there, figured out how to get into the web business. The company has since morphed. Right now, we're kind of divided into 4 sections. We have websites, which to date, we've built 600 plus custom websites. We have traditional marketing. So that would be television, radio, billboard, print, that size or that type of thing. And then we do Facebook marketing. And the last area is kind of visual. So that would be graphics, photography, videography, and things in that area.
Wow. So you guys have your fingers in a lot of places right now in terms of marketing.
We do. Yeah. It keeps us on our toes for sure.
And for those of you who got our email this morning, I really wanted to interview Wayne because they deal with a lot of complexity, which I want to dive into, both on doing the work fulfillment, and then on the needs of their clients changing all the time. And I think for a lot of my clients, that is the hard thing is, if it's a very simple process, it's easy to document and scale. But in your case, you get a lot of curveballs. And so what has it been like to grow a team? Because when you first did it, you were all doing it all yourself, I'm sure. So how have you grown a team in this kind of industry like this?
Yeah, so you're right. It started with just myself initially. And when I got that first client that said, yeah, I'm interested in a website, I turned online and started looking for a freelancer that I could hire, subcontract, and have the website built. So the first several years, all of the work that we did was strictly through subcontractors. And then as we began growing, as we began, having more need for our services, decided that, we need more people in-house to take care of some of these things. So, I don't remember where I originally heard this from. Everything that I share, I read a lot. You can see the books behind me. So there's a lot of what I'm going to probably mention today that it's not my original idea. It comes from somewhere else. And if I can remember who to attribute it to, I will, but I probably won't be able to. But I remember hearing very early on that as you grow a company, as you attempt to scale a company, that the company kind of goes through 4 unique stages. Mm-hmm. And so the first stage is what's called the me stage. So that is like, I've got this idea, I've got this passion, I've got this skill or talent. And so it's about me. It's my passion, my talent, my skill. I'm bringing it to the marketplace. It's also about I'm the salesperson. I'm also the fulfillment person. I'm also the janitor. I'm also the receptionist. Mm-hmm. So it's about me. And then as you move into the next stage of business, it becomes about we. And so that is where you begin building that team. And one of the core components in that area is where you are still jumping in and you still have your hands in a lot of things, but you're learning to delegate and to hand off bits and pieces of projects and client work. And then the next one beyond that stage would be the they. And that stage is where it's about the systems and processes. So once the systems and processes are in place, you focus on the they, and that's the systems mentality. It's kind of that elevated above, looking down at the business and seeing how it all fits together. And then the last stage is kind of the culmination of those 3 things together. And that is where you kind of reinvent or dive into different areas. Because what's true for most entrepreneurs is by default, by nature, by makeup, we often hate systems and structure and processes. That's why we love jumping from thing to thing to thing. And so what often happens as companies scale and as they grow, what you'll see, and then you see this in the news all the time, is the original founders, often when they get into the systems and processes, maybe when they go public and there's a lot of oversight, they end up leaving. And the reason they end up leaving is because they hate all of that system, structure, process, etc. So that's the long way around to the answer of your question of, when did we decide we needed to hire? What I knew early on was that if we're going to grow to any size of significance, if I wasn't going to be working 80 hours a week, if I wasn't going to be working every weekend, late at night, that people were a critical component to building a team and growing the business.
Mm-hmm. Well, very interesting. So it's about, and this is what I tell folks, is invest in yourself first in terms of getting yourself efficient, then your team, and then you document, and then you grow from there. So it sounds like you went through that process, but you did it with some creative folks along the way and some moving targets. So what were some of the systems you built first? Was it the website building first, or the marketing first, or the advertising? What was the first place you went?
Yep. So the very first area was the website side. Actually, we have all of our systems and processes. We have them all online. We use right now, we're still using Google Docs to kind of keep track of that stuff. Mm-hmm. But we also have physical copies. I'm a very tactile, tangible person. And so we have physical copies of everything. And so this is the website process. And so this will literally take anyone. I think it's in Work the System where Sam talks about off the street. Your systems and processes should be designed and built in such a way that you could literally have somebody walking by the front of your office, pull them in and say, here, I need you to build this website for our client, and they could do it successfully. And so that is what we've attempted to build in all of the areas of our business. And we did start with the website side because that was kind of the first area that we really grew and expanded.
So let's do a hypothetical, but I'm sure you have this all the time. So let's say someone comes to you and they own a cake. Actually, I just got a new client who bakes cakes. So a cake baking business, right? They've got maybe 10 employees and they want to build a website. How do you walk them through that? Because there's 100 different directions they could go.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two interesting parts to kind of managing creative work. So like you mentioned earlier, unlike a lot of businesses where it's very cut and dry with a million different variables possible, you have to manage both sides, which is the internal side, how the project's actually managed and handled, and then the external side, which is the client's expectations and kind of their view or their flow through the process. So what we've done is we've worked really, really hard to build systems on both sides that complement each other. So we never want our clients to feel like we can't make another round of changes because our system says, we've already made 3 rounds of changes. So sorry, 3 rounds of changes are over. The flip side of that is obviously with infinite possibilities, we don't want to get stuck making changes forever. So one of the things we do with a client is when we start a client, we have a starter pack. And so we sit down with them at the very first kickoff meeting. I realize most people can't see what's here, but the point is it's a process that we walk people through step by step in the very early stages of the project. Now, an important thing to note is that expectations get set way back from often the very initial inquiry to the first conversation with someone kind of on the sales team. And so it's very important that we have systems and processes in place that ensure we're setting the right expectations from the very, very beginning of the process. But what we do once we actually begin the process is we sit down with the client the very first meeting and we walk them through each of these cards. And there's not much on these cards. So this first card just explains the process that we're going to go through. Mm-hmm. And we call it the critical 5. And this is kind of our philosophy around building a website. The next one, and this is the one that really speaks to them and what they can expect of the process, is called the 5 phases. And we just simply explain, here are the 5 phases that we're going to go through as we build your website. Step 1 is going to be design. And we anticipate it's going to take this long to complete. Step 2 is this. I'm not going to go through all the steps, but you get the point. So, I don't know who originally said this saying or where this saying comes from, but the saying is there are no people problems. There are only systems and process problems. So does that not mean that, from time to time we don't have clients who, we get stuck in the design phase way too long? Absolutely, we do. But what that tells us is that we need to work to revise and refine our system so that going forward, we know, okay, right now we're averaging, I'm making this up, but we're averaging, 17 days in the design phase. Well, our internal target may be 14. So if we're constantly hitting that, we know we got a system problem somewhere that we need to drill into and get that figured out and fixed.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So what if you get a client who is always changing direction? So you get through the design, the wireframe, it starts to go live, and they say, actually, you know what? I want it totally different, and I found a new design. How do you deal with clients that are always changing direction like that, massive direction?
Yeah, so the answer to that is we force them to commit. So we force them to commit in our process. So we tell them at the very beginning that once we get to the design phase, you should feel that you love what we've designed. And if you don't feel that you love it, in other words, it's a gut feeling, we want to know, and we don't want you to sign off on the design. And so we actually have a form that people have to fill out when they approve the design that basically says, from this point forward, I understand that if there's significant design changes, they're probably going to come at a fee. We try to use analogies, paint pictures for people. So, because most people that we deal with, they've built websites before. So most of our clients already have a website. They're coming to us because it's not performing the way they hope it would or should. But what we do is we use analogy of building a house. So we sit down with them and we say, look, it's just like building a house. We're in the blueprint phase. You can change, you can move the bathroom, you can, whatever you want, we can do it. But once you sign off on those blueprints and we start building the walls, there's probably going to be some fees involved to build those walls. So again, it's not like we do have hard, fast rules, I would say, but it's more so about providing guardrails on either side. So as long as we keep the project in the guardrails, they're going to be happy and we're going to be happy with the outcome.
Okay. So they can change it as much as they want as long as they're willing to pay for it.
Well, in the design, in the design phase, and we set that up originally, they can change it as much as they want. It's just like a blueprint. You can move the bathroom as many times as you want, and it's not much work to do that. But once you start building the walls, get some money. Get some money ready.
Yeah. Well, then, so how about your team? So you kind of have this roadmap for your clients for them to walk through, and that all makes sense. And I mean, I've definitely. You don't need to be just a website designer. There's a lot of industries where this makes sense to kind of have milestones and checkoffs with your clients along the way. But what about for your team, for your employees? How do you keep all that work straight? Because I'm assuming you have a mixture of part-time, full-time, contractor staff, right?
Yeah. So again, not to bring back the system right here, but this binder, our process for building a website, literally walks step by step through the entire process. And then it's got, the notes that go along with each section. So, if you're stuck on a certain section, there's probably a note that tells you how to solve that particular issue that you're running into. I wish I could say it's like some magic formula that's, we've got this magical thing that takes place that we keep it all in line and on track. But the reality is it's systems and processes that we follow that constantly get updated and constantly get tweaked and adjusted based on not our feelings or not, we didn't feel the project went well, but actual real data. So, we keep track of how long projects take. We know different phases, how long those phases take on the projects. And so then we can use actual data and say, we're having this issue where we're constantly running into too long in the coding phase. So we then begin looking into that and figuring out where our system may be broken. We actually this came from somewhere, I don't remember where, but we recently started using what's called an issue log. So we have just a Google document, it's called an issue log. And so anytime anyone on our team runs into an issue, so it could be a client's upset because, they thought they were getting, whatever, a 10-minute video and we only have an 8-minute video or whatever it may be, it goes in the issue log. And then what we do is we come back to those issues and we work through those issues to see if they are symptomatic or if they're one-time kind of just anomalies that are out here in the fringes. And we use that issue log to ensure that our systems and processes are functioning correctly. Because when a system or process is broken, just like a dial or a gauge on a car, if the temperature gauge is too high, you've got an issue with the cooling system in the car. It's not keeping the engine cool enough. So kind of where to look based on the issues that you're seeing. So
in a dynamic industry like this, where there's always feedback coming from the customer, how do you determine between urgent and important and non-urgent but important and non-urgent, unimportant? Because those interruptions could really cloud up your day. Or do you kind of batch those comments?
Yeah. So we pride ourselves on great service. That is something. So to date, 90+% of our business comes from referrals. So we work really, really hard to be super responsive with all of our clients. So we don't necessarily batch issues that come in. When issues do come in, we try to jump on them and handle them as quickly and as immediately as possible. But to answer your question on how do we distinguish between important versus urgent, we do something, and we've played around with kind of how often this takes place and when this takes place, but we do something called focus time. And so during the week, we have block time that is focus time. And right now, the current version that we're using it's 3 days a week. It's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's from 10 a.m. to 10:50 a.m. And during that time, you are not allowed to work on any current projects. You can only work on future work, meaning You can work on the systems. You can work on the processes. You can work on, maybe you have an idea about how to market your division. So we use that time and we protect that time. Even in the most chaotic weeks, we protect that time to stay focused on the future and to stay focused on the things that are actually truly important versus just all the things that are screaming around us that are urgent.
So what would future work be like, research and development or new product development or new idea development? Is that what that is?
Yep, absolutely. Anything that could drive that particular, so every person does this, could drive their division, their department, their role forward. So it cannot involve any specific current client work that you're working on. It cannot involve any future client work, meaning, if you have a project starting in 2 weeks, you can't work on that project. It has to be kind of systems level work for the future.
That's interesting. Well, it shows you, as a leader and as an owner, investing in the future of your business and with your team. And I think that's very rare. Most people are very much, they're behind the eight ball. So they're just rushing. They're not thinking about the future and the systems that actually allow you to get ahead of the eight ball. That's cool. Well, I know before we started this interview, you mentioned some other interesting idea about how you manage your work structure between kind of time where you interact together as a team and then time where you have focused work. It's kind of a modified Pomodoro. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, by default, a lot of what we do would be considered highly creative work. And so it's often very collaborative work. When you think of creative work, you think of sitting around with a whiteboard and there's a team of people sitting around and they're brainstorming together and they're coming up with ideas together. But what we discovered over time was that to be the most productive that we could be in our roles, so whether it's my role, whether it's our manager Mara of the website division, what we've done is we block off the 50-minute block. So from the top of the hour, so say 10 a.m. to 10:50, there can be zero distractions. So if I have a question for Mara, like I'm curious about how a project is going on a website, I cannot go ask her that during the 10 to 10:50 time block. And we actually run this all day up until 4 p.m. We run this. So after 4 p.m. it's kind of a free-for-all. You can, and before I dive into that, this is the actual clock. It sits on a desk in the front of our office. And so this gets set every hour to 50 minutes and it slowly dwindles down. And then the timer goes off and then we know it's distraction time and we can go ask questions, we can whatever. But what we've discovered is that our level of productivity has gone up so much because what happens is as you're working, as I'm sitting working on a project or working on something coming up in the future, I'm thinking, what, I need to run and go ask Hannah this question. So I'll run in there and interrupt Hannah, who's in the middle of deep work. Cal Newport's great book on deep work talks about the importance of deep focus on work. And so I go interrupt her. And now, according to research, it's roughly, it varies, but 6 to 15 minutes for someone to get fully back engaged in what they were doing before the distraction. So, it certainly seems very stifling in a lot of ways from the outside. It's one of the things that we get made fun of a lot by friends and clients in the area. They think it's very, too structured, too elementary school, I guess. But our office initially, when we rolled this out, was very not excited about this. The concern was, if I'm working on something, I really need an answer. I can't go ask them. But what we've discovered is everyone really, really loves it because they're able to stay focused on what they're working on at the moment. And it forces everyone to think ahead. So if you're going to be working on something and you've got questions you need to get answered or whatever, it forces you to think ahead. Okay, I need distraction time. I need to ask all of these questions. Mm-hmm. And one caveat, if you're working on a project or something, you can schedule time during that time with another coworker, but it has to be scheduled. So you can't just go interrupt them and say, hey, can you meet for 15 minutes right now? It has to be pre-scheduled time.
Yeah, I love that. And almost everything can wait 50 minutes. So it's very rare when the emergency is that dramatic. That's cool. I've never heard of someone doing it that way. I certainly heard of focus time, but not as a company overall. Which kind of leads me to my next question, because your team is quite systematic with their procedures, with the binder there, which I think is great. What have the employees and contractors and part-timers and full-timers, what have they thought as they came into your business? Because this is kind of a new way, a new approach. Did they buy into it, or were they hesitant, or how has that gone?
Yeah, I think, on the surface, because of so much of what we do is highly creative work, people have this mindset that we're very lax and it's very fluid and it's very, laid back environment. And what we've learned over time is that's the public perception, but the reality is quite different internally. Don't get me wrong, we have a great team and we all get along very well, and we enjoy what we do, but we're very, very structured. And so what we've learned over time is in our hiring process, we actually have to warn people ahead of time about how serious we are about structure and systems and processes. But here's the thing that I would say, one of the things that I've always struggled with, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with this as well, is like, what is the balance between, good management versus micromanagement? And how do you know, like, what's too much one way, what's too much the other? And what I've learned over time is it's really about just establishing the guardrails. So in other words, we're going to operate in these time blocks from 0 to 50 minutes, but I'm not going to tell you what to do in your time blocks. I'm not going to micromanage your schedule. I'm not going to question, why did you spend 2 hours on this project versus an hour on this project? So there's a lot of autonomy within the guardrails that are there. And, there's all kinds of studies out there now that talk about autonomy in the workplace is very, very important for, employee team member satisfaction. And what I found is that those guardrails, when I have the peace of mind as an owner, as the entrepreneur, of knowing that the guardrails are there, they're going to keep people from running off the cliff on one side and from running into the mountain on the other side. It gives me peace of mind of giving them all the autonomy they want within those guardrails. Mm-hmm. So that's...
No, I think that's great. I mean, those of you who are listening to this and not watching this, Wayne is one of those guys who reads more books than I do. He's got a more impressive bookshelf than I do in terms of what he's read, and he certainly knows his stuff. And I couldn't agree more with regards to autonomy, but giving them the framework so they can't fall off the tracks, and so they can actually be remove the friction if everyone assimilates with the same boundary.
Yeah, let me just interject real quick into that. So one of the things is along that autonomy, somebody out there may be saying, but yeah, you have this system that they're supposed to follow, down to the nth degree. And here's what I would say is until there's an issue, we don't have to look at the system at all. So in other words, I said that earlier, there are no people problems. There's only systems and processes problems. So as long as I've given them the guardrails, I've given them the system to follow. If there becomes an issue, we then have to look and say, okay, first of all, was the system followed? Was the process followed? If the answer is no, then we have the conversation about, is there a reason, why wasn't it followed? And there may be a very valid logical reason as to why it wasn't followed. So then we look at, does it need to be added? Does that exception to the process, to the system need to be added? So we're very structured, but within that structure, lots of autonomy within that structure.
So what happens when a client asks for something that is new? Like maybe, I know you do a lot of different types of marketing, and they say, hey, you know what, now we want to do ads on YouTube. We want to do video ads on YouTube, and that's something that I don't know if you do this or not. Let's say it's a new thing, and there's no process for it. Do you say yes? Do you say no? Do you say we need to get a procedure first? What happens?
That's a very, very tough question for me, because as an entrepreneur, it's like, of course we can figure it out. Like, yeah, we'll do it. Let's just jump in. And I've had to learn over time to say no, which is not easy for me to do. So I've gotten better at saying no to the things that are outside our current parameter. Now, what we are looking for, though, is we are looking for patterns. So an example would be the newest service that we have kind of rolled out is Instagram and marketing on Instagram. And the way that came about was we've been doing Facebook for years, and we kept having clients ask, hey, can you help with Instagram? Hey, can you help with Instagram? And so what we're looking for is that pattern, as opposed to kind of the one or two off conversations. One right now that we're getting asked, pretty repetitively about is LinkedIn and marketing on LinkedIn. So that's kind of the next one. Once we build all the systems and processes around Instagram, that we'll begin looking at would be LinkedIn.
Interesting. Well, I've got a few other questions. I probably won't get to them all, but I wanted to ask you, because you wrote the book about it. So now you have a website. Now what? Is that book about how to make a website that sells, or how to use a website to gather data, or what was the premise of that book?
Yep. The premise of the book is simply this. So after building, at the point when I wrote that, I don't remember how many websites we had built. But a common thing is people come to us still today with this kind of magic bullet mentality. So they come to us thinking, if I just get the website built, the world's going to hear about my product, they're going to hear about my service, and everything's going to change. And the reality is that rarely ever happens that way. There's a lot more effort, there's a lot more action and tactics and strategies that have to go into actually turning your website into an actual tool that either drives leads, drives sales, serves whatever purpose that you think your website should serve. So that is where that book came from. The book came out of my frustration with the conversation constantly of your website's not this magic bullet. It's not going to come save the day. So once you do have your website, here are some things that you can actually do to turn that into lead generating machine, or help drive sales, things along those lines.
Okay. Well, very interesting. Well, Wayne, so what, because of time, what is one thing you want to leave the audience with, for the entrepreneur? Our audience is made up of small business owners, both online and traditional business owners. What's something that you really think would be important for them to come away with regards to creative work?
Yeah. So two things that I would say. I'll go ahead and say the simple one. It's this: consistency creates miracles. Consistency creates miracles. And so it doesn't matter what endeavor you're doing, whether that's building out your systems and processes, whether that's getting your website to actually drive leads, whether that's generating leads or sales on Facebook, consistency creates miracles. All too often entrepreneurs, have that mentality of jumping to the next big thing. And so they don't stick with things long enough to kind of reap the fruits or reap the benefits of what they started. So that's one. I can't stress that enough. Stick with it, even when it's not fun to stick with it. The other one would be this. So in marketing, so we do a lot of traditional marketing, and there's, again, infinite variables. But one of the things we've developed over time is something we call the natural progression. And so it's a question that we go back to pretty much on every single campaign that we develop. And we ask ourselves, where is this thing that we're doing? Where does it fall within this natural progression? So I'll explain to you briefly what it is. The natural progression, if you think of a clock. So at 12 o'clock is a stranger. And then at 3 o'clock would be a friend. So stranger, friend. And then at 6 o'clock would be a customer or a client. And then at 9 o'clock would be evangelist. So if you think of a clock moving around the clock, I think because I'm on video this way, that it's probably all backwards, but I don't know. Mm-hmm. But the goal of all marketing is to basically move people from stranger to a friend, from friend to a customer, and then from a customer to an evangelist. And once you move people to become evangelists, and that's the term we use, so it's basically an advocate, someone who's out there proclaiming your message about your company, your product, your service to the friends and to the world, you bypass the entire stranger part because they go tell all of their friends. And there's a few just simple elements that fit around this natural progression. So to move someone from a stranger to a friend, there's two elements required. They have to know about you and they have to like you. They're never going to become your friend if they, A, don't know about you and they don't at least like what it is that your brand, your product, your service stands for. And then the next phase to move from a friend to a customer or a client is they actually have to trust you. So no one's ever going to pull out their wallet and give you money if they don't trust that your product, your service is going to deliver on whatever you say it's going to deliver. And then to move from a customer to an evangelist, they actually have to love your product, and you have to give them tools. You have to indoctrinate them to become evangelists for you. And so when I say tools, an example of that would be back when it was during its rapid growth, Dollar Shave Club. So when someone would sign up for Dollar Shave Club, what would happen is they would give you a code that you could share on Facebook for all of your friends, so that if they signed up, you would get a kickback and your friend would get a discount. And so they provided a tool that made it easy for you to evangelize, to share the message with everyone else. So that simple framework for anyone doing any form of marketing is to really just think through, okay, I'm running Facebook ads. What is the goal of this Facebook ad? Is it to move someone from a stranger to a friend? Is it to move them from a friend to a customer? Or am I running this to customers trying to convince them to be an evangelist for the brand, for the product, for the service? So those would be my two things: consistency and the natural progression.
Wow. Yeah, those are both great. I got a follow-up question on the natural progression because I'm intrigued by this. How, maybe it depends. How fast does it take to get someone from hearing about you to knowing, liking, trusting, buying your product, loving your product, and using a tool? I mean, can that all happen within a few hours, or does that have to take years?
Yeah, so the answer is, unfortunately, it depends. Mm-hmm. It depends on the product, the service, and what it is. So, the creating evangelist part, not to divert from your question, but it's where most small businesses, they overlook that entire portion. And I'll come back to your specific question. But if you were to tell any small business owner, any entrepreneur, open up your marketing, your ad budget, and show me what % of your budget is spent on this side of the equation. In other words, taking strangers and getting them to buy my stuff versus spending money convincing your customers to become evangelists for you. Now, at the core of that, a great product and a great service is fundamental. So if the product or service doesn't deliver the value, then there's no convincing, there's no pleading, there's nothing I can do at that point to get you to go tell all your friends about my mediocre product or service. Mm-hmm. But to answer your question, it varies greatly depending on industry, kind of buying cycles that people go through. But I think the most important thing is that almost in every industry, you need to be devoting time and budget on turning customers into evangelists, giving them tools.
Very interesting. And I've got to believe that the spend, the amount of money it takes to take someone who's already loves the product to be an evangelist is cheaper in terms of getting new clients than paying money to get a raw, cold person in there new that must cost more money. It's probably less expensive, right, with the evangelist?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't remember the data or the stats, but it's something like, an existing client is 70% more likely to buy a new product that you launch than a stranger would be. And I can't remember the exact again, but they spend on average 40% more as a repeat customer than a new customer spends.
Wow. So that makes sense. You should invest in your systems and provide a good service.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Well, Wayne, where can people find you if they want more information about what you do and to find out more?
Yeah, uglymugmarketing.com. Everything that we do is there. They can find out a little bit more about me, find out about our services, and they can reach out if they'd like to through that platform, through our contact page.
Very good. And Wayne's been a friend of mine for years now. And so whenever I have somebody who needs a website, wants a website, I always send them to Wayne because they do a great job. And so if you're in the market for a new website, you need some help marketing, definitely check out uglymug.com, uglymugmarketing.com. Well, I hope you enjoyed the podcast with Wayne Mullins of Ugly Mug Marketing. And make sure to stay tuned next week where I share with you another podcast from either one of my past clients so you can hear their steps to success, or a business expert sharing a tool, technique, or resource that will help you make more and work less. And before I sign up today, make sure to leave us a comment or a thumbs up or some kind of some notice. Let us know that what you learned from this podcast, your biggest takeaway, comments about the podcast. And we're going to be giving away the newest edition of Sam Carpenter's book, Work the System. I'm going to try to twist his arm and get him to sign it and send it out there. But next week, we're going to pick somebody from one of the platforms, whether it's iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, any of the other podcast outlets out there, wherever you're listening. Just send us a screenshot of your comment and email it to info@workthesystem.com, and then we'll send you a free book. Or we'll be pulling out one of those next week. And that's it. Also, if you want to get a free digital download of the book, Work the System, just go to workthesystem.com and you'll find it there. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.